My name is Sarah Smith, and despite everything I've achieved, I was never good enough for my family. But that night, everything changed. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to walk away from someone who refused to see your worth. Growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia, I learned early that success wasn't measured by your achievements. It was measured by how well you fit the mold my father, Harrison Smith, had carved out for his children. And I never fit that mold. My brother Marcus was everything my father wanted in a son. Charismatic, conventionally successful, and most importantly, he chose a career path that looked impressive at country club dinners. While I was earning my MBA from Wharton and building my career in private equity, Marcus was climbing the corporate ladder at Pemberton Associates, one of Virginia's most prestigious consulting firms. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was making 7 figures managing investment portfolios for ultra-high net worth clients at Crystal Point Capital, my family still saw me as the difficult daughter who chose a man's job over marriage and children. Every family gathering was the same script. Marcus would regale everyone with stories about his latest client acquisition or his corner office upgrade, while I'd watch my father's eyes light up with pride. When it was my turn to share, the conversation would inevitably shift to when I was going to settle down or find a more suitable career, but this particular Thanksgiving was going to be different. I had something that would finally make them see me, really see me. 3 months earlier, I had closed the biggest deal of my career. A tech startup I'd been nurturing for 2 years had just been acquired by a Fortune 500 company. My commission alone was enough to buy a small island, but more importantly, it had me recognition as one of the top dealmakers on the East Coast. The acquisition had made headlines in the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. My LinkedIn was exploding with congratulations from industry leaders. But when I called my father to share the news, his response was predictably lukewarm. "That's nice, dear. Marcus just got promoted to senior director. We're so proud." That's when I decided to make a statement they couldn't ignore. I spent weeks planning the perfect gift for my father's 65th birthday celebration. Not just any gift. Something that would showcase exactly who I'd become and what I was capable of. After careful consideration, I settled on a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California Spider, the same model featured in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of my father's favorite films. The car was a masterpiece. Original condition, fully documented provenance, and valued at $18 million. I had the resources, and more importantly, I had the connections to acquire it through a private collector in Monaco. But the real gift wasn't the car itself. It was what came with it. The invitation to my father's birthday party arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. An evening of celebration, it read, hosted at the Smith family estate in the rolling hills outside Charlottesville. The guest list read like a who's who of Virginia's elite judges, politicians, business leaders, and old money families whose names were carved into university buildings. I RSVP'd with a simple note, looking forward to celebrating with the family. I have something special planned. The week leading up to the party, I made sure everything was perfect. The Ferrari was transported by a specialized carrier and stored at a secure facility 20 minutes from the estate. I had arranged for a dramatic reveal. The car would be driven up the circular driveway at exactly 8 p.m., just as dinner was concluding. But I also made one additional arrangement that my family didn't know about. You see, 6 months earlier, Pemberton Associates had approached Crystal Point Capital about a potential partnership. They were looking to expand their services to include private equity advisory, and they needed someone with my exact expertise to lead the initiative. The managing partner, Gregory Pemberton himself, had personally flown to New York to meet with. The meeting had gone exceptionally well. So well, in fact, that I now held a very interesting position that no one in my family knew about. The party was everything I expected it to be. The estate's grand ballroom was decorated in autumn colors, with towering arrangements of orange and gold flowers. A string quartet played classical music, while guests mingled with champagne and canapes. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a custom midnight blue Valentino gown that I'd had made specifically for the occasion. The dress was elegant but commanding. Exactly the image I wanted to project. Marcus was holding court near the fireplace, surrounded by a group of admirers as he told some story about landing a major client. He caught my eye and waved me over with that condescending smile I knew so well. "Vivian, there you are." I was just telling everyone about the Hartwell Industries account I just closed. 7 figures in consulting fees. He turned to his audience. "My sister here works in..." "What is it again? Something with money?" The group chuckled politely, but I could see the dismissive looks. To them, I was just the spinster daughter who'd chosen career over family. "Private equity," I said simply. "I help companies grow and transition." "Right." "Right." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Very technical stuff, not really for everyone to understand." My father appeared at my elbow, looking resplendent in his custom tuxedo. "Vivian, darling, you look lovely. Have you met Judge Morrison's son?" "He's recently divorced and looking to settle down." And there it was. The same conversation we'd had at every family gathering for the past 5 years. Dinner was a formal affair in the estate's dining room. I was seated between my great-aunt Millicent and a family friend whose main accomplishment seemed to be inheriting a shipping fortune. Marcus, naturally, was seated at my father's right-hand dot as the meal progressed. The conversation inevitably turned to business and careers. Marcus was in his element, regaling the table with stories about his latest successes at Pemberton Associates. "You?" "No," he said, cutting into his beef Wellington. "I've been thinking about expanding internationally. Gregory Pemberton mentioned they're looking at some European opportunities." My father beamed. "That's wonderful, son. International experience is so valuable." I took a sip of wine and waited. "Of course," Marcus continued, "it helps that I have such a strong relationship with the partners. They really value my strategic thinking." Judge Morrison's wife leaned forward. "And what about you, Vivian? Are you still doing that investment thing?" The way she said it made it sound like a hobby rather than a career that had made me one of the most successful dealmakers in the country. "I am," I replied calmly. Marcus laughed, a sound that carried just a hint of cruelty. "Sir likes to think she's some kind of financial wizard. But let's be honest, it's not exactly rocket science. Anyone can move money around and take a commission." The table went quiet. Even for Marcus, this was unusually direct. My father looked uncomfortable, but didn't contradict him. My mother suddenly found her salad fascinating. "I mean," Marcus continued, emboldened by the silence, "at the end of the day, what does she actually produce? At least what I do requires real skill, real client relationships. Anyone can play with other people's money." The humiliation was complete. In front of the most important people in my father's social circle, my own brother had reduced my life's work to playing with money. I set down my fork and looked directly at him. "You're absolutely right, Marcus. Anyone can move money around." He looked surprised by my agreement, but pleased. "Which is why," I continued, "I'm curious about your opinion on the Pemberton expansion strategy." "Well," he said, puffing up with pride, "I think we're positioned perfectly, too." "I'm sorry," I interrupted gently. "I should have been more specific. I'm curious about your opinion on the expansion strategy I designed for them." The table went silent again, but this time the energy was different. Marcus's face clouded with confusion. "What do you mean?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a leather portfolio. From it, I extracted a letter on official Crystal Point Capital letterhead. 6 months ago, Gregory Pemberton approached my firm about a strategic partnership. He wanted to expand Pemberton Associates into private equity advisory services. I paused, letting the words sink in. He specifically requested me to lead the initiative. Marcus's face was slowly draining of color. "I've been working closely with the Pemberton partners on their expansion strategy. In fact, I've been reviewing all their major client acquisitions to identify potential investment opportunities." I pulled out another document, including the Hartwell Industries account you mentioned. Interesting deal structure, by the way. Though I did recommend some adjustments to maximize the value creation potential, the silence at the table was deafening. The partnership was finalized last month, I continued. Crystal Point Capital is now the exclusive private equity partner for Pemberton Associates, which means, in a technical sense, I'm now part of the ownership structure of your firm. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. But you're right about one thing, I said, smiling sweetly. Anyone can move money around. The skill is in knowing where to move it. Just as the shock was settling over the table, the sound of a car. Engine echoed from the driveway. A very specific, very expensive car engine. Through the dining room's tall windows, guests could see headlights approaching the front of the house. What's that? My father asked, craning his neck to see. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my dress. That would be your birthday gift, Daddy. We all moved to the front windows and terraces to watch as the most beautiful car any of us had ever seen in person came to a stop in the circular driveway. The 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California Spider gleamed under the estate's landscape, lighting like a jewel. The collective gasp from the guests was audible. My God, breathed Judge Morrison. Is that a real 250 GT? It is, I said. 1961 original condition, fully documented provenance. My father looked stunned. Vivian, you can't possibly. I can, I said simply. And I did. The professional. Driver stepped out and walked toward the house, keys in hand. But as he approached, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Marcus was whispering something to my father, and my father's expression was changing from amazement to something else entirely. Vivian, my father said, his voice taking. On that tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant I was about to be disappointed. This is ... this is too much. Too much? I asked, confused. A gift like this, he continued, glancing at Marcus. It's not appropriate. People will talk. They'll think you're trying to, I don't know, buy your way into the family's good graces. The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus stepped forward, his confidence apparently restored. Dad's right. I mean, it's a nice gesture, but it's kind of desperate, don't you think? Desperate. The word echoed in my mind as I looked around at the faces of the guests. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed to be enjoying the drama, but none of them were looking at me with the respect I'd expected. Besides, Marcus continued, we don't really know how you afforded something like this. I mean, given your ... situation. My situation? As if being one of the most successful private equity executives in the country was somehow shameful. My father nodded slowly. Marcus has a point. Perhaps it would be better if you returned it. Get your money back. The humiliation was complete. After everything I had achieved, everything I had built, my own family was suggesting that I had somehow acquired this gift through questionable means. But then I heard something that changed everything. Marcus's phone rang. In the midst of the awkward silence, the sound seemed exceptionally loud. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. I need to take this, Marcus, my father said firmly. We're in the middle of... It's work, Marcus said quickly. It's important. He stepped away from the group, but not far enough. In the quiet of the evening, we could all hear his side of the conversation. Hello, Mr. Pemberton. Yes, sir, I know it's late. What? No, I wasn't aware... She's what? The conversations around us gradually died down as people began to notice Marcus's increasingly distressed tone. I understand, sir. Yes, sir, I'll be sure to... Of course, sir. Thank you for calling. He hung up and stood frozen for a moment, his back to us. Marcus? My father prompted. What was that about? Marcus turned around slowly, his face ashen. He looked directly at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my brother's eyes. Fear. That was Gregory Pemberton, he said quietly. Yes, my father pressed. He ... He called to congratulate me on having such a distinguished sister. The words hung in the air like a challenge. He wanted to make sure I knew how fortunate the family was to have someone of Vivian's caliber and reputation. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. He said he was looking forward to working with her on the expansion, and that he hoped I understood what an honor it was to have her guidance on company strategy. Marcus swallowed hard. He called her Madam throughout the conversation, and when he mentioned me, he referred to me as Madam Smith's brother. The change in the room was immediate and palpable. Suddenly, the guests who had been looking at me with barely concealed pity were staring with something approaching awe. Judge Morrison stepped forward. Vivian, I had no idea you were working with Pemberton and Associates. That's incredibly impressive. His wife nodded eagerly. Gregory Pemberton is so selective about his partnerships. He must think very highly of you. I could feel the power dynamic shifting like tectonic plates. These people who had spent years treating me as the disappointing daughter were suddenly recalibrating their entire perception of who I was, but the person whose opinion mattered most was still standing in stunned silence. Daddy? I said gently. My father looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Vivian, I had no idea the scope of what you do. I tried to tell you, I said simply, many times. Marcus stepped forward, clearly trying to regain some control of the situation. Look, this is all very impressive, but let's not lose sight of... Marcus, I interrupted, my voice carrying a new authority that surprised even me. Perhaps you should call Mr. Pemberton back. What? Why? Because, I said, pulling out my phone, I believe you may have misunderstood something important. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I was looking for. As I dialed, I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Hello, Gregory. It's Sarah Smith. Yes, I know it's late, but I'm at a family gathering and I wanted to clarify something about the partnership structure. Yes, that's right. Could you explain to my family exactly what my role will be in the expansion? Gregory Pemberton's voice filled the evening air, clear and formal. Certainly, Miss Smith. As we discussed, Crystal Point Capital will be taking a 30% equity stake in Pemberton and Associates as part of the expansion initiative. You'll be serving as Chief Strategy Officer for the partnership with full authority over all private equity integration and client development. The guests exchanged glances. Even I could see they were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were hearing. And just to clarify, I continued, this means that technically, I'll be in a senior leadership position relative to the existing consultant staff? That's correct, Pemberton replied. All senior consultants, including Marcus Smith, will be reporting to you on matters related to the expansion. I hope that won't create any awkwardness within your family. I looked directly at Marcus, whose face had gone from pale to green. Not at all, I said. Thank you, Gregory. Enjoy your evening. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was as if the entire universe had paused to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the Smith family dynamics. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. My father was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The guests were whispering among themselves, clearly trying to process what they had just heard. So, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the terrace, to answer your earlier question, Marcus, about what I actually produced... I gestured toward the Ferrari gleaming in the driveway. I produce results. I produce value. I produce opportunities for growth and expansion. I took a step closer to him, and starting Monday, I'll be producing performance reviews for senior consultants who may need to recalibrate their understanding of what constitutes real skill in the business world. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. My father finally found his voice. Vivian, I owe you an apology. I had no idea. You had no idea, I interrupted, because you never bothered to ask. You never bothered to understand what I do or why I do it. I turned to address the entire group. For years, I've listened to conversations about Marcus's achievements while my own were dismissed as technical stuff or not really for everyone. To understand, the Ferrari's engine was still ticking as it cooled. providing a subtle soundtrack to my words. I've been called desperate, inappropriate, and questionable. I've been told I'm trying to buy my way into the family's good graces. I looked directly at my father. But the truth is, I've never needed to buy anything. I've earned everything I have through skill, dedication, and the kind of strategic thinking that companies like Pemberton and Associates specifically seek out. Judge Morrison stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. Before him, "Perhaps we should give you all some privacy to discuss this." "No," I said firmly. "I think it's important that everyone understands exactly what has happened here tonight." I walked over to the Ferrari and ran my hand along its perfect lines. This car represents about 3 months of my earnings. Not my savings, not some inheritance or loan. 3 months of what I make doing work that my family has consistently. Diminished and dismissed, I turned back to face them. I bought it because I wanted to give my father something that would make him proud. Something that would finally make him see me as successful. My voice caught slightly, but I pressed on. Instead, I was told it was inappropriate, desperate, and questionable. I was told to return it and get my money back. The professional driver was still standing nearby, keys in hand, clearly unsure of what to do. "Marcus," I said, "you asked what I actually produce? Let me show you." I walked over to the driver and took the keys. "Thank you for your excellent service. Your payment has already been processed, along with a substantial tip." The driver nodded gratefully and walked toward the secondary vehicle that had followed him up the driveway. I held up the keys to the Ferrari, and every eye was fixed on them. "This is what I produce," I said. "The ability to make decisions that matter. The authority to determine value and distribute resources. The power to create opportunities or close them down." I looked directly at Marcus. "And starting Monday, I'll be producing your performance evaluations." What happened next surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of throwing the keys at Marcus or driving away in a dramatic exit, I simply handed them to my father. "This is still your birthday gift," I said quietly. "I hope you enjoy it." My father took the keys with trembling hands. "Vivian, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "But I do." I turned to address the assembled guests one final time. I spent my entire adult life trying to earn respect from people who were never willing to give it. I've achieved everything I set out to achieve, and more. I've built a career that allows me to make a difference in the world and to reward the people I love. I looked at Marcus, who was still standing frozen in shock. But I've learned something important tonight. Respect isn't something you can earn from people who have already decided not to give it. It's something you have to give to yourself. I walked over to where my purse sat on one of the terrace tables and picked it up. "I won't be returning to work at Pemberton and Associates on Monday, Marcus. I'll be calling Gregory first thing in the morning to recommend that Crystal Point Capital pursue other partnership opportunities." Marcus finally found his voice. "Vivian, wait. You can't just—" "I can," I said simply. "That's the power of being successful enough to make your own choices." I turned to my father one last time. "Enjoy the car, Daddy. It's paid for, titled, and insured. Consider it a farewell gift." As I walked toward the valet stand where my own car was waiting, I heard my father call after me. "Vivian, please, let's talk about this." I paused at the edge of the terrace and turned back. In the golden light from the house, with the Ferrari gleaming behind him, my father looked smaller than I've ever seen him. "We've been talking about this for 30 years, I said. "The only difference is that now you're finally listening." I could see Marcus whispering urgently to him, probably trying to salvage the Pemberton partnership. But I had already made my decision. "If you'll excuse me," I said to the assembled guests, "I have some phone calls to make. European markets open in a few hours, and I have some very interesting opportunities to explore." As I walked away, I heard Judge Morrison's wife whisper to her husband, "Did you know she was that successful?" "I had no idea," he replied. "Harrison never mentioned it." Of course he hadn't. Because to my father, success had always been measured by how well you fit the predetermined mold, not by what you actually achieved. The valet brought my car around. A understated but elegant Aston Martin DB11 that I bought for myself the previous year. As I drove down the long driveway, I caught a glimpse of the Ferrari in my rearview mirror, still gleaming under the estate's lights. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse apartment in Manhattan and made 2 phone calls before I even got out of bed. The first was to Gregory Pemberton. I explained that due to unforeseen family complications, Crystal Point Capital would be withdrawing from the proposed partnership with Pemberton Associates. I recommended that they pursue their expansion plans independently as I felt our firms. Involvement might create conflicts of interest. Gregory was disappointed but understanding. I hope this doesn't reflect poorly on your brother's position with us, he said diplomatically. That's entirely up to you, I replied. Marcus will need to stand on his own merits. The second call was to my assistant, Sarah, who had been with me for 3 years and knew better than to ask questions when I had that particular tone in my voice. Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks, I told her. I'm going to Monaco to look at some investment opportunities. The Hartwell Industries follow-up can wait? She asked. The Hartwell Industries deal is off the table, I said. Find me something more interesting. As I hung up, I realized that for the first time in years, I felt genuinely free. Free from the weight of trying to prove myself to people who had already decided I wasn't worth their respect. Free from the exhausting cycle of achievement and dismissal that had defined my relationship with my family. Over the next few weeks, I learned through industry connections that the aftermath of my withdrawal from the Pemberton partnership had been more significant than I had anticipated. Without Crystal Point Capital's backing, Pemberton Associates had struggled to find another private equity partner willing to fund their expansion. The European opportunities that Marcus had been so excited about were put on indefinite hold. More importantly, Gregory Pemberton had apparently done some research into my background and was now very aware of exactly how prestigious my reputation was in the private equity world. Marcus, meanwhile, was dealing with questions about why his own sister had withdrawn from such a potentially lucrative partnership. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Marcus had called me several times, but I had instructed Sarah to handle all family communications. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done. The Ferrari, I learned, was still sitting in my father's garage. He had apparently been too overwhelmed to drive it. 3 months later, I was in my office reviewing acquisition targets when Sarah buzzed me on the intercom. There's a Harrison Smith here to see you, she said. He says he's your father. I looked up from my computer screen, surprised. My father had never visited my office before. In fact, I wasn't sure he had ever been to Manhattan for any reason other than business dinners. Send him in, I said. My father entered my office looking older than I remembered, but also somehow more substantial. He was wearing a well-tailored suit and carrying a leather portfolio that looked expensive. Hello, Vivian, he said quietly. Hello, Daddy. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. Please sit. He sat down and looked around my office, really looked at it. I could see him taking in the wall of awards, the photos with industry leaders, the view of Central Park from the floor-to-ceiling windows. I should have come here years ago, he said finally. Why didn't you? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Because I was afraid. The honesty of the admission surprised me. Afraid of what? Afraid of realizing how wrong I had been about you, about what you do, about who you are. He opened his portfolio and pulled out a stack of newspapers and magazines. The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Financial Times, all featuring articles about deals I'd been involved in, companies I had helped grow, success stories that had my name prominently featured. I spent the last 3 months reading everything I could find about your career, he said. Do you know that you're mentioned in a Harvard Business School case study about innovative deal structuring? I did know that, but I had never told him. I called some people I know in the financial industry, he continued. People whose opinions I respect. They all said the same thing. You're not just successful, you're exceptional. You're the kind of person they would want managing their own investments. He looked directly at me. And I've been treating you like a disappointment for years. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, my father continued. I came here to understand. To finally understand what I've been too stubborn and proud to see. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. What do you want to understand? How? You became this person despite me, not because of me. How you built something this impressive while I was telling you it wasn't important. It was a fair question and one I had never really articulated to myself. I became this person because I had to, I said finally. Because proving myself to you wasn't enough. I had to prove myself to myself. My father nodded slowly. Marcus told me what you said about respect being something you have to give to yourself. And I realized that I've never respected myself enough to recognize real achievement when I saw it. I was so focused on appearances, on what looked successful to other people, that I couldn't see actual success when it was sitting at my own dinner table. He pulled out another document from his portfolio. I brought something for you. It was a deed. The deed to a piece of property I recognized. A beautiful estate about an hour outside of Charlottesville that had been in our family for generations, but had been sitting unused. I want you to have this, he said. Not as an apology, but as an acknowledgement. You're the one in this family who has the vision and the resources to do something meaningful with it. I looked at the deed, then back at him. What about Marcus? Marcus? We'll be fine. He's good at what he does and he'll find his own way. But you ... double quotes. He paused. You've already found your way. You've built something remarkable. We talked for another hour, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like my father was actually listening to me, really listening, not waiting for me to finish so he could change the subject or offer unsolicited advice, but genuinely trying to understand who I was and what I had built. I told him about the deals I was most proud of, not the most profitable ones, but the ones that had helped companies grow and thrive. I showed him the thank you letters from entrepreneurs whose businesses I had helped scale. I explained the difference between moving money around and creating value. I wish I had understood this earlier, he said as our conversation was winding down. I wish I had been the father you deserved. You can't change the past, I said, but you can choose how you show up in the future. He stood up to leave, then paused. The Ferrari is beautiful, by the way. I finally took it for a drive last week. How? Was it? Exhilarating, he said with a slight smile, but also humbling. Every time I drive it, I'm reminded of what it represents, what you achieved, what I almost threw away. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the city skyline. The conversation had been healing in ways I hadn't expected, not because it erased the years of dismissal and disappointment, but because it acknowledged them. Honestly, 6 months later, I received an invitation that surprised me. It was for Marcus's wedding, something I had expected never to be invited to again. But the invitation came with a handwritten note. I know I have no right to ask this, but I hope you'll consider being there. I have some things I need to say to you, and I'd like to do it in front of the people who matter most to both of us. I almost threw the invitation away. But something about the tone of the note made me reconsider. IRSVPD, yes, but with conditions. I would attend the ceremony, but not the reception. I would be there as a family member, not as a potential business connection. And I would leave immediately if I felt uncomfortable. The wedding was beautiful. It was held at a country club in Virginia with all the traditional elegance I had expected. Marcus looked happy, and his bride, Elizabeth, seemed genuinely lovely. But the real surprise came during the reception, when Marcus stood up to make a toast. Before I thank everyone for being here tonight, he said, I need to address something that's been weighing on me. He looked directly at me, and I felt my stomach tighten. 6 months ago, I humiliated my sister in front of our family and friends. I dismissed her achievements, questioned her integrity, and made her feel unwelcome in her own family. The room went very quiet. I did this because I was jealous, because I was insecure, because I couldn't handle the fact that my little sister had achieved more than I had ever dreamed of achieving. He paused, his voice catching slightly. Vivian, I know you're planning to leave after dinner, and I understand why. But before you go, I want everyone in this room to know something. He turned to address the entire gathering. My sister is one of the most successful private equity executives in the country. She's been featured in major financial publications. She's advised Fortune 500 companies. She's created value and opportunities for countless businesses and investors. He looked back at me, and I tried to diminish all of that because I was afraid it made me look small by comparison. The room was completely silent now. Vivian, I can't undo what I said or how I made you feel, but I can make sure that everyone who matters to our family knows the truth. You are brilliant, you are successful, and you are someone I should have been proud to call my sister all along. He raised his glass to Vivian, who taught me that the most powerful revenge is simply being excellent at what you do. The toast was followed by a moment of silence, then spontaneous applause from the wedding guests. But I barely heard it. I was too busy processing what had just happened. Marcus had done something I never expected. He had publicly acknowledged not just my success, but his own failure to recognize it. He had used his wedding, one of the most important days of his life, to set the record straight about who I was and what I had achieved. After the dinner, I did stay for part of the reception. Not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged at a family gathering. Elizabeth, Marcus's new wife, came over to introduce herself properly. I've heard so much about you, she said. Marcus talks about your career constantly. He's incredibly proud of you. He has a funny way of showing it, I said, but without the bitterness that would have been there 6 months earlier. Elizabeth smiled. He knows that. He's been working on it. As the evening wound down, Marcus approached me one more time. Thank you for staying, he said quietly. Thank you for what you said, I replied. It couldn't have been easy. It was the easiest thing I've ever done, he said, because it was the truth. And I should have said it years ago. We stood there for a moment, not quite ready to hug, not quite ready to pretend everything was perfect, but finally ready to be honest with each other. I heard about the Pemberton situation, I said. How are you handling it? He shrugged. I'm handling it. Gregory actually gave me some good advice about building my own reputation instead of relying on family connections. That's good advice. It is. He paused. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Withdrawing from the partnership. I mean, it would have been awkward for everyone. I smiled. It would have been interesting, though. Terrifying is more like it, he said, and we both laughed. Over the following months, my relationship with my family settled into something I had never experienced before. Mutual respect. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness. Still old patterns that occasionally resurfaced, but it was real. My father and I began having regular phone conversations about business and life. He started asking for my advice on investments, and I started sharing more details about my work. He even visited my office twice more, bringing potential clients who were looking for private equity advisory services. Marcus and I developed a professional relationship that was separate from our family dynamics. When Pemberton Associates finally found a different expansion partner, he called to tell me about it. When I closed a particularly challenging deal, he sent a congratulatory email that was both professional and genuinely warm. The Ferrari became a symbol of something unexpected. My father drove it regularly, and every time he did, he told people the story of how his daughter had given it to him. But he told it differently now, not as a story about an inappropriate gift, but as a story about a successful daughter who had wanted to share her success with her family. Looking back, I realized that the revenge I had planned was nothing compared to the revenge I actually got. I didn't want to shock my family into recognizing my success. Instead, I had shocked them into recognizing their own failures. The phone call from Gregory Pemberton hadn't been the moment of triumph I had imagined. It had been the moment when my family finally understood the cost of their dismissal and disrespect. But the real victory hadn't been in Marcus's humiliation or my father's embarrassment. It had been in my own decision to walk away from people who refused to value me and to build a life that didn't depend on their approval. The months after the confrontation had taught me something important. Revenge isn't about making other people feel bad. It's about making yourself feel free. A year after the birthday party incident, I received recognition that put everything into perspective. Crystal Point Capital was named Private Equity Firm of the Year by the Financial Times, and I was personally recognized as Dealmaker of the Year for my work on a series of technology acquisitions that had transformed 3 different industries. The Yuan award ceremony was held at the Plaza Hotel in New York, and it was attended by the most influential people in finance, technology, and business. When my name was called, I walked to the podium knowing that I had finally achieved something that was entirely my own. Success, I said in my acceptance speech, isn't about proving yourself to other people. It's about proving to yourself that you can build something meaningful, something that creates value for others and fulfillment for yourself. I looked out at the audience of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and fellow deal makers. The most powerful revenge against those who doubt you is simply being excellent at what you do. Excellence speaks for itself, and it echoes long after the doubters have gone silent. The applause was thunderous, but more importantly, it was genuine. These people understood what I had built because they had built similar things themselves. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by congratulations and business cards, but the moment that mattered most came when I checked my phone and found a text from my father, watching the live stream. "So proud of you. Love, Dad." 2 weeks after the awards ceremony, I received a call that surprised me. It was from Gregory Pemberton. "Vivian, I hope you don't mind me calling directly," he said. "I wanted to discuss something with you." "Of course," I replied, curious. "I've been following your career since our initial discussions, and I have to say, I'm impressed by what you've accomplished. The Financial Times recognition was well-deserved. Thank you. I'm calling because I have a proposition for you. Pemberton Associates is looking to establish a new division, strategic advisory services for high-net-worth families. We need someone with your expertise and reputation to lead it." I was quiet for a moment, processing the offer. "That's interesting, Gregory, but I'm very happy at Crystal Point." "I understand. But this wouldn't be a traditional employment arrangement. We're looking for a consulting partnership. You would maintain your position at Crystal Point while providing strategic oversight for our new division." The irony wasn't lost on me. The partnership that had been withdrawn because of family drama was now being offered again, but on my terms. "I'd be interested in hearing more," I said. "Wonderful. And Vivian? I want you to know that your brother has been nothing but professional and supportive about this possibility. He actually suggested that I reach out to you directly." After I hung up, I sat in my office thinking about how much had changed. Marcus had gone from trying to diminish my achievements to actively supporting opportunities for me. My father had gone from dismissing my career to bragging about it to anyone who would listen. The revenge I had planned had been about proving them wrong. The revenge I had actually achieved was about proving myself right. 6 months later, I was back in Charlottesville for a very different kind of family gathering. My father had organized a dinner to celebrate the success of the new Pemberton Advisory Division, which had exceeded all expectations in its first quarter. The dinner was held at the same country club where Marcus's wedding had taken place, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of the formal, stuffy affair I'd expected, it was relaxed and genuine. Marcus was there with Elizabeth, who was now pregnant with their first child. My father was there with my mother, who had been quietly supportive throughout the families evolution, but had never felt comfortable with confrontation. And I was there with David, a fellow private equity executive I'd been seeing for several months. "I have an announcement," my father said as we were finishing dessert. "I've decided to establish a scholarship fund at the University of Virginia Business School. It will be called the Sarah Smith Scholarship for Women in Finance." I looked at him in surprise. "Daddy, you didn't need to." "Yes, I did," he said firmly. "I spent years not understanding what you do or why it matters. This scholarship will help other young women pursue careers in finance, and it will make sure that your achievements are recognized where they should be." He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. "The endowment is funded and ready to go. The first scholarship will be awarded next fall." I opened the folder and saw the scholarship details. It was substantial, enough to cover full tuition and living expenses for a promising student. But more than that, it was a public acknowledgement of my career and achievements. "There's one more thing," my father continued. "I'd like you to be involved in selecting the recipients. Your expertise and insight would be valuable in identifying students who have the potential to make a real impact in the field." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how profoundly everything had changed. The family that had once dismissed my achievements was now celebrating them. The brother who had mocked my career was now collaborating with me professionally. The father who had never understood my work was now ensuring that other young women would have opportunities to pursue similar paths, but the most important change was in me. I no longer needed their approval or recognition to feel successful. I had built something meaningful on my own terms, and their eventual acknowledgement was gratifying but not necessary. The Ferrari was still in my father's garage, but now it represented something different than it had originally. It wasn't a desperate attempt to buy approval. It was a generous gift from a successful daughter to her father. The narrative had changed because I had changed it. 3 months later, I received a letter from the first recipient of the Sarah Smith Scholarship. Her name was Sarah Chun, and she was a first-generation college student who wanted to specialize in sustainable investing. Her letter was full of gratitude and excitement about the opportunities the scholarship would provide. "I want you to know," she wrote, "that your success has inspired me to pursue my own goals, even when people tell me that finance isn't for someone like me. Thank you for showing me that excellence is the best response to doubt." Reading that letter, I realized that my story had become something bigger than personal revenge or family drama. It had become a template for other women who were trying to build something meaningful in a world that often undervalued their contributions. A year later, I was invited to speak at a conference for women in finance. The audience was full of young professionals who were navigating the same challenges I had faced: family expectations, professional skepticism, and the constant pressure to prove themselves. "The most important lesson I've learned," I told them, "is that revenge doesn't have to be destructive. The most powerful revenge is constructive. It's building something so excellent that it can't be ignored or dismissed." I looked out at the audience of ambitious, talented women. Some of you are probably dealing with families who don't understand your career choices. Some of you are working with colleagues who question your capabilities. Some of you are facing people who think you're too ambitious or too aggressive. I paused, remembering my own journey. Here's what I want you to know. Their opinion of you is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself and to the work you're building. Focus on excellence, not on proving people wrong. Excellence speaks for itself. After the speech, a young woman approached me. "I heard about what happened with your family," she said. "How do you forgive people who hurt you like that?" It was a question I had been asked before, and I'd been thinking about things were for months. "I don't think forgiveness is about forgetting or excusing," I said. "I think it's about choosing not to let other people's limitations define your possibilities." My family's inability to see my worth wasn't really about me. It was about their own fears and insecurities. She nodded thoughtfully. "But how do you move forward?" "By building something so meaningful that their approval becomes irrelevant, by creating value that speaks for itself, by becoming so secure in your own achievements that you can be generous with people who weren't generous with you." Today, as I tell you this story, I can honestly say that I have no regrets about what happened that night at my father's birthday party. The humiliation I felt was real, but it was also necessary. It forced me to confront the reality of my family dynamics and to make choices that ultimately led to a more authentic and fulfilling life. The scholarship fund has now supported 12 young women in their finance careers. 3 of them have already graduated and are working at top firms. One has started her own investment company. Another has joined an impact investing firm focused on sustainable development. My relationship with my family continues to evolve. Marcus and I now collaborate on deals occasionally, and our professional relationship has strengthened our personal one. My father calls me regularly for advice, and he's become one of my biggest advocates in his social circles. But most importantly, I've learned that the best revenge isn't about other people at all. It's about yourself. It's about building something so excellent, so meaningful, so undeniably valuable that it becomes its own reward. The Ferrari is still in my father's garage, but now it's just a beautiful car that a successful daughter gave to her father. The story has been rewritten, the relationships have been rebuilt, and the legacy has been redefined. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? Sometimes the most powerful revenge is walking away, but sometimes the most powerful revenge is staying and building something so excellent that it transforms. Everyone around you. My story isn't really about revenge at all. It's about the power of refusing to be diminished by people who can't see your worth. It's about the courage to build something meaningful even when the people closest to you don't understand or support what you're doing. The night my brother mocked my job, I thought I wanted to prove him wrong. What I actually did was prove myself. Right. I proved that I could build something valuable, something lasting, something that creates opportunities for others. The most elegant revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's building something so beautiful, so excellent, so undeniably valuable that it changes not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. If my story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Revenge, and share your truth in the comments, because sometimes justice whispers and still echoes forever.